Right now, somewhere on this planet, roughly 560 billion pieces of chewing gum are being consumed every single year. People chew it on subway platforms, in classrooms, and grocery store checkout lines across 6 continents. But almost no one knows what they are actually putting in their mouths. If you check the back of a modern pack of gum, you will likely see a vague ingredient called gum base. That term is a legally permitted catch-all that hides a specific blend of synthetic polymers, primarily chemicals like polyvinyl acetate and styrene butadiene rubber. Those are not culinary ingredients. They are the exact same industrial plastics used to manufacture car tires and plastic shopping bags. For most of human history, chewing gum was a completely natural habit. From Stone Age teenagers in Scandinavia chewing birch pit to the ancient Maya harvesting sap from jungle trees, humanity chewed organic tree bark and resin for thousands of years. So we have a mystery. How did a global population get quietly tricked into abandoning a 10,000-year-old natural habit, replacing it with the mass consumption of non-biodegradable synthetic plastic? The modern gum industry actually starts in the 1850s on Staten Island. Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, the exiled former president of Mexico, arrived in New York carrying a massive supply of chicle, a natural milky tree sap from the jungles of Central America. Santa Anna was scheming to fund his return to power, and he partnered with a local inventor named Thomas Adams. They hatched a specific plan. They were going to vulcanize this jungle chicle and turn it into a cheap, highly profitable alternative to industrial rubber. Adams spent months in his lab boiling and treating the chicle. He tried making chicle toys, chicle biscuits, and chicle buggy tires. The experiment was a complete failure. The materials simply would not hold up to physical stress, and Santa Anna eventually gave up and abandoned the project. Adams was left with a warehouse full of useless tree sap. He was ready to dump it all into the East River until he happened to see a young girl in a drugstore buying a piece of brittle, paraffin wax chewing gum. Adams realized his failed rubber experiment, which was stretchy, smooth, and held its shape, was actually the perfect chewable material. Nobody set out to invent a global candy empire. The multi-billion-dollar chewing gum industry was born as a desperate pivot to monetize a failed industrial supply chain. Once chicle was packaged as gum, it needed to find an audience. That task fell to a 29-year-old soap salesman who arrived in Chicago in 1891, William Wrigley, Jr. He realized that giving away gum as a free bonus to sell baking powder was a mistake because customers preferred the gum. Wrigley was a marketing savant. He bought massive billboards, sponsored radio shows, and executed one of the most expensive and aggressive direct marketing stunts in early corporate history. He mailed a complimentary 4-stick package of chewing gum to every single household in the United States that owned a telephone. While Wrigley was buying up market share, Accidental Chemistry was expanding the product line. In 1928, a 23-year-old accountant named Walter Deemer was tinkering with recipes in a company lab and accidentally mixed a formula that was extremely stretchy and less sticky. The only food dye he had on hand in the lab was pink. He had just invented modern bubblegum. By the 1930s, these relentless business pivots, massive advertising campaigns, and accidental chemistry breakthroughs had taken a byproduct of Central American tree sap and turned it into an inescapable fixture of American daily life. Then the world went to war, and the United States military officially reclassified chewing gum from a civilian luxury to a critical tactical asset, packing it alongside ammunition on supply lists. The reasoning was purely practical. Soldiers in foxholes and jungles lacked access to toothbrushes, and chewing gum stimulated saliva production to keep mouths clean. It fought off intense thirst on long marches and provided a cheap, portable way to relieve tension in combat zones. The demand was astronomical. To meet it, the Wrigley Company made a staggering logistical commitment. They pulled their core brands entirely from civilian shelves and dedicated the complete output of their factories exclusively to the U.S. Armed Forces. The average American service member chewed more than 600 sticks of gum by the end of the war. As troops moved through Europe and Asia, they handed out sticks to local civilians, physically spreading the chewing habit across the globe and tying it permanently to the image of American liberation. But there was a catastrophic consequence to scaling an organic product this fast. The sheer volume of global military demand completely overwhelmed the natural sapodilla trees in Central America. The chicle supply chains broke under the pressure. The wartime supply collapse forced manufacturers into a corner. To keep the factory lines moving, chemists had to abandon the organic crops that sustained the habit for centuries and engineer completely synthetic alternatives. The chemists found their permanent solution in the laboratory. They discovered that synthetic polymers could perfectly replicate the elastic chewiness of natural tree sap. This artificial rubber was infinitely cheaper to mass produce, incredibly consistent, and completely detached from the limits of tropical agriculture. Manufacturers executed a silent bait and switch. They never made a public announcement about the chemical change. They simply loaded the new plastic base with sweeteners and softeners. So it tasted the same, chewed the same, and cost the same. Consumers never noticed the difference, but the urban environment certainly noticed. Because this new synthetic gum did not biodegrade, it became a massive infrastructural hazard. In Singapore, discarded gum was stuck to the door sensors of the city's brand new mass transit trains. It jammed the mechanisms and paralyzed the network, forcing the government to ban the sale of chewing gum entirely in 1992. The convenient, cheap synthetic replacement that solved a wartime supply crisis had inadvertently caused humanity to pave its public spaces in thousands of tons of tiny, indestructible rubber wads. A single piece of discarded synthetic chewing gum can take anywhere from 5 to 1,000 years to break down in the environment. That means the wad of gum stuck to the bottom of your shoe will likely outlast the concrete sidewalk beneath it. Today, growing eco-awareness and consumer pressure are finally catching up to the $30 billion chewing gum industry, forcing companies to confront their massive plastic waste crisis and find a biodegradable way forward. The irony here is rich. To solve the pollution problem, a growing number of manufacturers are abandoning their synthetic laboratories and returning to the exact same plant resins and sapodilla trees that Thomas Adams tried to replace over a century ago. The modern corporate solution for sustainable chewing gum is a direct return to the sustainable methods the ancient Maya perfected in the jungles of southern Mexico thousands of years ago. Over 10 millennia, the chemistry evolved, the corporate empire scaled, and the base materials completely flipped. But the fundamental human urge to chew never faded. We always have, and we always will. The only question now is whether we keep chewing plastic or find our way back to the trees.